A busy grocery store. A black elderly woman reaches for her purse at the counter, but the impatient cashier loses his temper, raising his voice and even shoving her hand away. The crowd gasps, but what happens next will leave everyone stunned, because the woman he disrespected isn't just any customer. She owns the very place he works in. What would you do if you saw someone disrespecting an elderly person in public? Would you step in, stay silent, or call for help? Tell us in the comments below. Your voice matters. Before we continue, don't forget to subscribe to Rise Against Odds and press the bell icon so you never miss powerful stories that open hearts and change minds. The small-town grocery store was alive with chatter that afternoon. Customers shuffled through aisles, carts rattled, and the smell of fresh bread drifted from the bakery section. Behind the counter stood Chris, a young cashier known for his impatience and sharp tongue. To him, this job wasn't about service, it was about speed. Anyone who slowed him down became a target for his frustration. That day, an elderly black woman named Mrs. Johnson walked slowly toward the counter. She wore a faded floral dress and carried a small handbag. Her movements were careful, the kind that spoke of both age and dignity. She placed a few items on the counter: bread, milk, and fresh vegetables. To her, this was just another quiet shopping trip. But Chris, tapping his fingers on the register, groaned loudly. "Ma'am, can you hurry it up? There are people waiting," he snapped. His tone carried no respect, only irritation. The customers behind her shifted uncomfortably. Mrs. Johnson tried to pull out her purse, her hands trembling slightly. Instead of patience, Chris rolled his eyes. When her coins slipped from her hand and scattered across the counter, he muttered under his breath, "This is ridiculous. Some people shouldn't even be shopping alone." Gasps rippled through the line. An older man frowned. A young mother shook her head. Still, Chris didn't stop. He shoved the coins back at her, his voice rising. "You're holding everyone up. If you can't keep up, don't come here." Mrs. Johnson looked up at him quietly. Her eyes were calm, but there was something powerful behind them, something Chris didn't notice. He saw only a frail, old woman. But what he failed to realize was that he had just crossed a line with the very last person he should have disrespected. As the store grew tense with silence, Mrs. Johnson gathered her things slowly, her face unreadable. She didn't respond to his cruelty, not yet. But the truth about who she really was about to shake the room to its core. The uncomfortable silence hung heavy in the air. Customers exchanged uneasy glances, but no one dared speak up. Chris, still irritated, slammed the register drawer shut and crossed his arms. "Next!" he barked, as though Mrs. Johnson were invisible. But Mrs. Johnson didn't move. She adjusted her handbag with dignity, her back straight despite the sting of humiliation. The young mother in line leaned toward her child and whispered, "That's not right. She deserves respect." The older man from earlier muttered, "He's going to regret this." Chris noticed the whispers but brushed them off. He thrived on control and the power of his position behind the counter. In his mind, Mrs. Johnson was just another slow customer, nothing more. He had no idea how wrong he was. As the tension built, the store manager, a nervous man named Peter, stepped out from the back office. He noticed the scene and frowned. "Chris, what's going on here?" he asked cautiously. Chris shrugged dismissively. "She's just taking forever. I don't have time for this." Peter's expression shifted. He glanced at Mrs. Johnson, his face paling slightly. He recognized her immediately, not just as a regular customer, but as someone of far greater importance. His voice dropped to a whisper. "Chris, do you even know who she is?" Chris let out a short laugh, waving his hand dismissively. "Yeah, she's just some old lady holding up the line. What's the big deal?" His arrogance dripped with every word. Peter, the manager, looked horrified. He leaned closer, lowering his voice, but unable to hide his panic. "Chris, you don't understand. This isn't just a customer." Chris rolled his eyes. "Then who is she? The mayor? Come on." He turned back to the register, clearly unimpressed. But Mrs. Johnson remained calm, her quiet gaze fixed on him. Peter swallowed hard before speaking again. "That woman is Mrs. Johnson. She's the one who owns the store." The words seemed to freeze time. Customers in line gasped, whispering to one another. The young mother, who had watched everything happen, put her hand over her mouth in shock. Even the older man who had been muttering earlier stood straighter, his eyes widening. Chris blinked in disbelief, his smirk vanishing instantly. "What? That can't be true. She's just—" Mrs. Johnson finally spoke, her voice steady, calm, but cutting through the tension like a blade. "Just an old woman? Just someone who doesn't deserve your respect." Her words carried no anger, only a quiet authority that filled the room. Peter nodded urgently, confirming the truth. "She built this place years ago. Everyone in this town knows her story. Without her, none of us would even be working here." Chris's face turned pale. The realization hit him hard. He hadn't just been rude to a customer. He had insulted the very woman who signed his paychecks, the owner who had poured her life into building the business he so casually disrespected. For the first time that day, Chris had no words. His confidence crumbled, replaced by a growing panic. Around him, the customers' expressions shifted, some satisfied, others disappointed, all waiting to see what would happen next. Mrs. Johnson adjusted her purse once more and stepped forward, her eyes never leaving his. The moment of truth had arrived, and Chris knew it. The tension in the room felt electric. All eyes were fixed on Mrs. Johnson as she stepped closer to the counter. Her hands, though aged, moved with grace. She didn't need to raise her voice. The quiet authority in her tone silenced the entire store. "Chris," she began softly, "I built this store from nothing. Decades ago, when no one believed in me, I worked day and night to make this place a safe corner for the community. Every brick here was laid with sacrifice and prayer." Chris stared at her, his throat dry. He tried to speak, but no words came out. Mrs. Johnson continued, her eyes unwavering. "Do you know why I hire young people like you? Because I believe everyone deserves a chance. I see potential where others see flaws. But respect is not optional. It is the foundation of everything here." The young mother in line nodded, whispering to her child, "That's true strength." The older man folded his arms, a faint smile of approval on his face. Chris lowered his head, shame burning in his chest. He replayed every harsh word he'd thrown at her. The arrogance that once fueled him now crumbled under the weight of truth. Mrs. Johnson leaned in slightly, her voice calm but firm. "If you cannot treat the people who walk through these doors with kindness, you do not belong behind this counter. Every person matters. Every soul deserves dignity, no matter their age, their pace, or the color of their skin." The store was silent, the lesson echoing far beyond Chris. Customers shifted, some with tears in their eyes. They weren't just witnessing discipline, they were watching a masterclass in grace, leadership, and justice. Chris finally whispered, I'm sorry." His voice cracked, the weight of his mistake heavy in his heart. Mrs. Johnson studied him quietly. Forgiveness hung in the air, but so did consequence. The crowd leaned in, waiting to see how she would respond. Chris stood frozen, his apology hanging in the air. The room remained silent, every customer waiting for Mrs. Johnson's response. Her calm eyes softened, but her voice remained steady. "Apologies are a start," she said gently, "but change is proven through action. Respect is not a favor, it is a duty." She straightened her posture, the weight of years of experience visible in her presence. "I've seen people walk into this store with nothing but pain in their hearts, and I've watched kindness change them. This store isn't just about groceries. It's about community. And today you forgot that." Chris swallowed hard, his face flushed with regret. The arrogance he once carried was gone, replaced by humility. He whispered again, more earnestly this time, "I promise I will do better. I'll treat every person with respect, no matter what." Mrs. Johnson studied him for a moment before nodding. "Then prove it, not to me, but to every person who walks through these doors." The customers erupted into quiet murmurs of approval. The young mother smiled softly, holding her child closer. The older man gave Chris a firm nod, as though silently saying, "Make it right." Peter, the manager, exhaled in relief. "Mrs. Johnson," he said with admiration, "this store is what it is because of you." Mrs. Johnson gave a small smile and turned to leave. But before she stepped out, she paused and looked back at Chris one last time. "Remember," she said, "kindness costs you nothing, but disrespect may cost you everything." With that, she walked out, her dignity untouched, her lesson forever etched in the hearts of everyone who had witnessed it. Chris remained behind the counter, his head bowed. He knew that from that day forward, every action, every word, would reflect the lesson he had learned from the woman who not only owned the store, but owned the respect of an entire community. The store slowly returned to normal, but the memory of that moment would linger far longer than the sound of any ringing cash register.